Mornings in my house always unfold with the same quiet ceremony, as if time itself has memorized my routine and insists on repeating it faithfully. At precisely 6 o'clock, the antique clock in the living room chimes with its solemn, almost regal sound, and without fail, I stir awake a minute later. It has been like this for decades, long enough that the habit feels less like choice and more like destiny. Fielding used to call me his living chronometer, a phrase he would deliver, with a gentle laugh curling at the corners of his lips. He said it with admiration but also with amusement, as though my punctuality were a curious gift. Precision, he often told me, is the courtesy of kings, and also the dignity of Yvonne Holloway. His words echo in my mind every morning, as familiar as the tick of the clock itself. I still reach out to the other half of the bed, though it has been 10 long years since his side went cold. My hand wanders in the dark, searching instinctively for warmth that will never return. The pillow has lost every trace of his aftershave, that comforting blend of cedar and bergamot. Yet, in the early silence, I sometimes swear I catch the faintest whisper of it, like a ghost passing by. 10 years. For memory, it feels like yesterday. For grief, it stretches into an endless eternity. The Victorian mansion on Elmwood Avenue in Neatville towers around me, too large for one woman to truly fill. Its 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, the library, the study, and the broad kitchen once rang with life. Fielding and I would host Sunday lunches, filling the air with the clinking of glasses and the laughter of friends. Now, only the library and our bedroom retain purpose. The rest of the house lies in slumber, as though waiting for Fielding to return and awaken it again. Fielding was not simply an architect. He was an artist of space, a man who bent stone and wood into poetry. To him, buildings breathed. He could carve silence into arches and laughter into hallways. Architecture is frozen music, he would say, borrowing from Goethe, his eyes alight with conviction. And our home, this house, was his symphony, his most personal masterpiece. I wrap my robe around my shoulders and pad into the kitchen. The kettle hisses softly as I prepare my morning tea Darjeeling, strong as ever. Fielding always preferred coffee, dark and bold. We spent 42 years together without ever convincing one another to switch. Somehow, those tiny disagreements gave our marriage its character, the little reminders that 2 people can share a life yet keep their differences intact. Outside the window, Neatville stirs to life. Trimmed hedges, straight driveways, lawns cut with military precision. It's the perfect American dream backdrop. We moved here in 1998, when Fielding was commissioned to design the new Northwestern College building. We meant to stay for a year or 2, but the city clasped us in its arms, and we never left. The phone's ring slices through the morning calm. My heart jumps before I even look at the screen. It's Baxter, my son. His name flashing so early unsettles me. I hesitate, staring at it for a breath too long before answering. "Good morning, Mum." His voice carries that forced brightness, that polished chippiness he wears like a suit. "I hope I didn't wake you." "You know I'm always up at 6, I answer. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," he says quickly. "Just wanted to remind you, Rosamond, and I will stop by around 3 this afternoon." "You didn't forget, did you?" "I didn't forget," I reply, though part of me wishes I had. "I'll bake your favorite apple pie." "No, don't bother, Mother." His tone turns clipped, slightly patronizing. "Rosamond thinks you should rest more. At your age, you shouldn't be standing in the kitchen for hours." At your age. How often I've heard that phrase recently, as though 68 places me on the brink of fragility. As though I've turned into a porcelain doll that might crack from the smallest strain. I press my lips together. "I feel fine, Baxter. and I enjoy baking, I say firmly. Well, if you insist. We'll see you at 3, he replies, his voice carrying that familiar edge of dismissal. The line clicks and I return to my cooling tea. Whenever I think of seeing my son these days, I feel both anticipation and dread. I love him. He is mine, my only child, my flesh and blood. But since Fielding's passing, something has shifted between us. It's as though Fielding once softened. Our rough edges a buffer between our stubborn natures. Without him, it's just Baxter and me, 2 iron wills, colliding. I take apples from the fridge, set them on the counter, and roll up my sleeves. Rosamond may prefer I sit idle, but I will not. As long as my hands can grip a rolling pin and my memory recalls recipes, I will bake. The dough spreads beneath my palms and I recall long talks with Fielding about the future. We were never dreamers, blind to reality. Both of us came from families scarred by money troubles. His parents lost everything in the recession of the 70s. Mine quarrelled endlessly over pennies. We must secure our independence, Ivan, he said during our first year of marriage. No matter what. We did. Stocks at first, then a modest apartment to rent. When his architectural firm grew strong, we ventured further. Venice was our turning point. In 1993, Fielding worked on restoring a palazzo. I fell for the city at first glance. Its canals, its shadows, its light, it felt eternal. When the chance came to buy a small apartment in Dorsoduro, we seized it. 5 years later, we added another in Cannaregio. He jokingly called them our Italian insurance. But we both knew they were more than jokes. They were escape routes, lifeboats for any storm. Later came the Swiss account, set up when his AME practice expanded internationally. He pressed the papers into my hands with quiet insistence. Confidential, he said. Even from Baxter. Especially from Baxter. At the time, it felt unnecessary. Baxter was still just a student, head full of economics and bright plans. But now I see. Fielding had always read character more sharply than I could. Perhaps he already glimpsed the traits in Baxter that I now face in full. 3:15. The doorbell rings. Always late. Fielding hated that about Baxter. Punctuality is respect, he'd say. But Baxter never learned. I open the door. My son stands tall, dark hair streaked with grey at the temples, shoulders broad like his father's. Yet his expression holds none of Fielding's warmth, only the tension of someone endlessly calculating. Rosamond is at his side, small, porcelain-skinned, hair like gold sculpted perfectly into place. Her smile is precise, too precise, the kind that looks practiced before a mirror. "Mum, you look tired," Baxter says instead of greeting. "Did you sleep well?" "Hello, son." "Hello, Rosamond," I reply evenly, ignoring the remark. "Come in, the pie's ready." "Ivan," Rosamond scolds gently, slipping off her designer coat. "You've been at the stove again. We told you. It wasn't necessary." "It's a pleasure, darling." We step into the kitchen. My pride clean, orderly, timeless. But I see Rosamond's eyes flick around, appraising, judging. Outdated, she thinks. Old appliances, old tiles, an old life. Their own kitchen is sleek and modern, sterile like an operating theatre. "Mum," Baxter says, sitting at the table, declining the tea I pour from a London set 3 decades old. "There's something important we need to discuss. It's about the house." "Ah, at last. The hints have been building for months. We think," Baxter continues, voice rehearsed, "this mansion is too large for you. Too costly, too demanding. You're retired now. You have to think about your future. Your father left me more than enough to manage, I reply softly. Steady. And I am comfortable here. But it's unsustainable, Rosamond cuts in. Why pay to heat rooms you don't use? We found a wonderful new apartment complex, modern, with medical staff, fitness center, swimming pool. For the elderly, I repeat slowly. A nursing home, in other words. It's not a nursing home, Rosamond insists, nose wrinkling as though I'd soured her wine. It's refined, full of people your age. You'd make new friends. I have friends. I set a slice of pie on Baxter's plate. And I am not ready to abandon the house where I've spent most of my life. No one's talking about selling, Baxter interjects quickly, too quickly. But I can hear the thought pressing at the edge of his words. We could rent it out. It would give you extra income. While I move into your modern complex, I finish for him. No. Thank you. I'll remain here. Mum, be reasonable. His voice sharpens, irritation slipping through. You're 68. You need to think about what's ahead. I think about it every day, I answer calmly, unshaken. And my plan is to stay. Yvonne Rosamond leans forward, her smile polished yet urgent. We're worried about you. Last week you forgot. Our call. The day before yesterday you couldn't recall the name of the postman, though he's been here 2 years. These are troubling signs. I look at my sister-in-law, trying to figure out if she really believes what she's saying, or if she's just using a convenient argument. Forgetfulness is a convenient accusation. Any slip-up can be blamed on age and the onset of dementia. I don't remember the mailman's name because I'm not interested in him. Rossman, I reply. And your call has slipped my mind because I had a book club meeting that day that ran late. It's called priorizing, not senile dementia. Baxter sighs, exchanges a look with his wife. I see in that look a silent message. She's getting difficult. We're going to have to do things differently. Okay, Mum. Let's not talk about that now. He suddenly changes tactics. How's your garden? Are the roses blooming yet? This abrupt shift from pressure to small talk is another troubling sign. They haven't backed down. They're just taking a pause. They'll look for other approaches, other arguments. The rest of the visit is spent in tense politeness. We talk about the weather, about the new exhibition at the gallery where Rosamond works, about the grandchildren's school successes. The pie remains almost untouched. Rosamond is watching her figure, and Baxter has already had lunch. When they finally leave, I stand at the window for a long time, watching a silver SUV pull out of the driveway. What would Fielding say when he sees what our son has become? A financial analyst always complaining about not having enough money, yet changing his car every 2 years. A Manwo sees his own mother as a burden and a potential inheritance. I going to Fielding study, the only room. I haven't remodeled since his death. Everything is the same as the day he left the desk with the blueprints, the bookshelves, the old leather chair. I open the secret drawer in the desk where the documents for the Venetian apartment and the Swiss account information are kept. Everything is in order. Everything is in place. You were right, darling, I say into the emptiness of the room. The independence should have been secured. Thank you for insisting. That evening I call Pearl Edmonds, my oldest friend and the only person besides Fielding who knows about my overseas assets. I met her in college and she's been a loyal friend for decades. They came again, I say without preamble. Did they hint? At the nursing home again? Pearl always grasps the point instantly. A state-of-the-art senior housing complex. I clarify sarcastically. Imagine Rossman's already got me an apartment there. That's very thoughtful. They're not going to back down, Yvonne. Pearl's voice is troubled. The Victorian mansion in downtown Naperville is too big a piece of property. I know. I sigh. But I'm not backing down either. Maybe you should tell them. Pearl suggests cautiously. About Venice, about the score? It would cool their appetite. No, I answer firmly. Fielding kept that information from Baxter for a reason. If they knew about the money, it would only increase their pressure. They'll want of everything, not just the house. We talked to Pearl for a long time. She's the only person I can be completely honest with. Even with Fielding in the last years of his life, I didn't always share my fears and doubts for fear of upsetting his weak heart. Before I go tobed, I walk through the rooms of the house again, checking the windows and doors, a habit from when Fielding and I were here alone. In my son's empty bedroom, now a guest room, I stop at a picture of little Baxter and his father. They're flying a kite in the park. Fielding laughs. Baxter looks at him with adoration. When and why did that adoration turn to cold calculation? What went wrong in our family? Unanswered questions. As I lie in bed, I think about how Fielding and I once planned to grow old in this house, surrounded by a loving family. Now, instead of family worm, it's a cold war over square footage and inheritance. I'm not going down without a fight. If Baxter and Rosen think they're dealing with a helpless old lady, they're in for a big disappointment. I have resources they don't even know they have, and I'm ready to use them when the time comes. It was a surprisingly warm April morning. I was drinking coffee on the veranda, watching a pair of robins nesting in an old apple tree. Fielding had planted that tree our first year in Neepville. A house without an orchard is not a house, just a building, he used to say. The apple tree survived 3 hurricanes and 1 harsh winter when the temperature dropped to -30. A hearty creature like myself, the doorbell rang, taking me by surprise. I wasn't expecting visitors, and delivery men usually leave packages on the porch. When I opened the door, I saw Baxter, Rosen, and a strange woman holding a leather folder. Mum, good morning. Baxter smiled a little too broadly. I hope we're not too early. This is Helena Price. She'd like to see the house. A tour of the house? I looked from one face to the other. Why, Mrs. Holloway? The stranger held out her hand. I'm a realtor with Premium Estates. Your son tells me you're planning a sale, and I'd like to appraise the property. I didn't shake the outstretched hand. Instead, I turned to Baxter. I'm not planning to sell the house. Who gave you the right to bring realtors here? Mum, we just wanted to know the market value. Baxter tried to defuse the situation. That doesn't obligate you to do anything. I know the market value of my house. My voice sounded colder than I intended, and I don't need an outsider to help me determine it. Rossman intervened with hurt-marked smile. Yvonne, dear, don't take it personally. We just wanted to help. Real estate prices in Neepville are on the rise, and your house could be worth a lot. More than you think right now. I'm not selling the house, I repeated slowly, enunciating each word clearly. I'm sorry, Miss Price, but you've wasted your time. The realtor looked at Baxter in confusion. He avoided my gaze. I understand, Helena said at last. I apologize for the inconvenience. If you change your mind, here's my card. I mechanically took the cardboard rectangle, but as soon as the trio left the porch, I tore it into small pieces. That evening, Baxter called to apologize. His voice sounded genuinely remorseful, but I knew my son too well. He could feel any emotion when it was necessary to accomplish a goal. Mum, I'm sorry we barged in like this without warning. Helena happened to be in town passing through, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to get a professional evaluation. Next time, please coordinate such visits with me. I said, trying to remain calm. I don't like surprises. Of course, Mom. By the way, Rosalind and I wanted to invite you to dinner on Saturday. Nothing fancy, just a family evening. I said yes, even though my inner voice warned me of the danger. After the realtor incident, I was even more wary of any initiatives by my son and daughter-in-law. The dinner went relatively smoothly, though not without some unpleasant moments. Rosamond had prepared some fancy vegetarian dish that tasted like cardboard flavored with herbs. Their house, as always, was spotlessly clean and sterile, as if they didn't live in it, but just photograph edit for a real estate catalogue. Baxter showed me an apartment at Sunset Gardens today, Rosamond said casually as we moved on to dessert. It's a new senior centre. It's gorgeous. Pool, spa, 24-hour medical care. Interesting. It took a sip of wine. Why was Baxter looking at this apartment? Well, Mum, my son blushed slightly. We're thinking about the future. Your future. I'm planning my future, I replied. And it doesn't include moving into a nursing home, whatever you want to call it. Ivan. Rossman leaned slightly toward me. It's not a nursing home. It's an upscale assisted living complex. Very well-off people live there, who are in their 70s. I finished for her. Thank you, but no. Mom. Baxter went into a prepared argument. Your house needs constant maintenance. The roof needs repair. The heating system is outdated. It's going to take a lot of money. And Sunset Gardens will take care of all that. I can afford to hire workers to fix the roof, I said. And the heating works fine. Fielding installed a new system only 15 years ago. 15 years is an eternity for modern technology. Rosman interjected. There are much more efficient systems now. The conversation went on like that for some time. I steadfastly rejected all offers to move. They insisted with polite insistence. As we moved on to coffee, Baxter suddenly changed the subject. By the way, Mom, we're having a little financial trouble, he said casually, as if he were talking about the weather. The market is unstable and my investments aren't yielding the returns I expected. I'm sorry, I replied sincerely. Despite our differences, I was worried about my son. What can I do to help? Oh, nothing much, he said with a wave of his hand. I just wanted you to know we may have to postpone our trip to Europe this summer. Rossman's upset. She was so excited to show the kids Italy. Italy. I felt my back muscles tense up. What part of Italy were you planning to visit? Venice? Florence? Rome? Rosamond swirled with a look of longing. A classic itinerary. But now I guess I'll have to wait. Unless she did not finish the sentence, but there was an unspoken dot. Unless you help us with money. Maybe I can help a little, I said, though I had no intention of doing so. Let's talk about it later, Baxter. He nodded, a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. The plan had worked. Mum was sympathetic and willing to shell out the money. If only he knew how transparent his manipulations were to me. The next week, their tactics became even more aggressive. Rosamond happened to be at my house with some woman she introduced as a space organizer. Yvonne, this is Olivia. She helps people get rid of clutter and create a more functional interior. Rosamond chirped as I stood on the doorstep, blocking their way into the house. I thought you could use her help. There are so many antiques. She said the word antiques as if she were talking about garbage. Thank you, Rosalind, but I'm quite happy with my antiques. I emphasized the last word, and I don't need the services of a space organizer. Olivia, a professional and collected woman in her 40s, was clearly uncomfortable. Mrs. Holloway, I understand your concern. Many of my clients are wary at first of the idea of letting go of things they're used to, she said softly. as if speaking to a child. But then they feel so relieved. Imagine how much easier it will be to take care of the house without all these objects. Olivia, I looked her straight in the eye. These objects are my life. The paintings my husband and I have collected over the years. Books we've read together. Souvenirs from our travels. I'm not going to turn my home into a sterile space to please someone else's idea of modern design. Rosamond pursed her lips. Olivia mumbled an apology and they left. I closed the door and leaned back against it, feeling my knees shake. This constant siege was starting to get on my nerves. In the evening, Baxter called apologizing for his wife's initiative. You know, Rosamond mother, he said, his voice sounding tired. She just wants what's best for her. Sometimes she goes a little overboard. Baxter, I decided to be blunt. What's going on? Why are you always trying to get me to move or change the house? Nothing's going on, Mom. He sounded almost convincing. We're just worried about you. This house is too big. It takes a lot of strength to maintain. I have enough strength, I replied. And I'm hiring help for the garden and general cleaning. Everything is under control. Of course, Mother. His tone became condescending. Just think about our suggestions, okay? No rush. I hung up the phone, feeling a growing unease. Their insistence seemed excessive for simple concern for an elderly mother. Something else was behind these attempts. The answer came 3 days later when I received a letter from a Venetian bank. Usually, correspondence from Italy came to the P. box I had rented, especially for this purpose. But this time, for some reason, the bank sent the letter to my home address. I was just opening the envelope with the Banco Diania logo when the doorbell rang. I shoved the letter into the pocket of my robe and went to open the door. Rosamond stood on the doorstep with a basket of fruit. Ivan, good morning, she said with a smile. I was passing by and thought I'd drop off some fresh fruit for you. They're organic from the farmer's market. Thank you, Rosamond. I took the basket, without inviting her in. That's very nice of you. Can I come in for a minute? She weighs already, taking a step forward. I'd like a cup of tea. It's been such a hectic day. It was impossible to refuse without being overtly rude. I reluctantly stood back, letting my sister-in-law into the house. Of course, come into the kitchen. I'll put the kettle on. Rosamond followed me, her eyes gliding quickly throughout the rooms as if she were taking inventory. She sat down at the table in the kitchen, chatting casually about exhibitions and charity events. I put the kettle on and took out the cups. Your letter fell out, Rosamond said suddenly, pointing to the floor. I turned around and saw that an envelope from a Venetian bank had indeed slipped out of the pocket of my robe. Rosamond had already bent down to pick it up. I'll take it, I said quickly, ahead of her by just a second, but she could see the logo and part of the sender's address. Banco di Venezia. Her eyebrows rose in feigned surprise. You get letters from an Italian bank, Ivan? It's an advertisement. I lied, tucking the envelope into my pocket. You know how banks are aggressively promoting their services these days, even internationally. Rosamond obviously didn't believe me, but she didn't insist. Her gaze, however, became more evaluative. By the way, Ivan, she changed the subject. Have you thought about updating your will? Baxter is worried that the documents may be out of date. It's been 10 years since Fielding died. That's what it is. The will, the inheritance, the money. It all came down to this. My will is in perfect order, Rosalind. I replied, pouring the tea. Fielding had made sure that all the legal documents had been drawn up correctly. But 10 years is a long time. She persisted. Laws change. Maybe we should consult a new lawyer. We have a great friend who specializes in inheritance cases. Thank you for your concern, but I'm quite satisfied with my current lawyer. I put a cup of tea in front of her. Lemon. Rosamond stayed for another half-hour or so, continuing to probe my finances and assets. I answered evasively, trying not to betray my growing irritation. When she finally left, I breathed a sigh of relief and took the letter out of my pocket. It was a standard notification about the status of my account and the need to confirm that my contact information was up to date. It was nothing special, but the very fact that Rosamond had seen the envelope worried me. What if she told Baxter? What if he started digging deeper? I called the bank and asked them to send all correspondence exclusively to the P box from now on. Or better yet, to switch to electronic notifications. Then I dialed Pearl's number. "They're up to something," I said without preamble when she switched the phone. "Rosamond saw a letter from the Venetian bank today," Pearl swore, which rarely happened. To her. Did she realize what it was? I'm not sure, but right afterward, she started talking about the will. "I don't like it, Ivan." Pearl's voice sounded concerned. "They're trying too hard to control your finances and property. It goes beyond normal family." Concerned, I know, I sighed. Baxter had mentioned financial difficulties the other day. Said he couldn't afford a trip to Europe, Italy. Coincidence? Pearl sounded doubtful. "I don't think so. I think he suspects something. Maybe he found some old documents in Fielding's things or noticed my regular trips to Venice." "You must be very careful," Pearl said. "If they find out about your assets, the pressure will only increase." "I know. I'm changing passwords to all my accounts and rechecking my privacy settings. Fielding always said that paranoia is an investor's best friend." Pearl grinned. "He was a smart man. Fielding. All right. Keep me in the loop, and if you need anything, call me anytime." After talking to Pearl, I decided to do some investigating of my own. Baxter had mentioned financial difficulties. How serious were they? He's always lived large, expensive cars, vacations to exotic resorts, private school for his children. But was he really in trouble? Or was this just a way to make me feel sorry for him? I opened my laptop and began searching for information about the company where Baxter worked. The news was disappointing. The firm was really going through some bad times. Several failed investments, major clients leaving, and CC investigation. Perhaps its financial problems were real, but that didn't explain the obsession with my house. Even if I sold it and gave all the money to Baxter, it wouldn't solve his problems. Forever. There was something else at work here. I remembered Rosamond had once mentioned that her gallery was planning to open a branch in Europe. Venice would be the perfect place, she had said then. Was it a coincidence, or had they somehow found out about my apartment? A phone call interrupted my musings. The number was unfamiliar. "Mrs. Holloway?" A man's voice asked. "This is Dr. Richardson from the Evergreen Clinic. Your son made an appointment for a cognitive evaluation. We'd like to confirm the appointment for next Tuesday at 10 o'clock in the morning." I felt the blood rush to my face with anger. "Dr. Richardson." My voice sounded calm. "My son has no right to make an appointment for me without my consent. I will not be attending this counseling session, and I would advise your clinic to check if the person making appointments for elderly relatives has the proper credentials. Yeah, I'm sorry, Mrs. Holloway." The doctor was clearly embarrassed. "We didn't know. Your son said you were experiencing memory and orientation problems." "My son is wrong," I retorted. "Good day, doctor." I hung up the phone, feeling my hands shaking. So, this is so far they're willing to go to try to prove that I was incompetent. It wasn't just pressure anymore. It was a threat. I called Pearl again. "Baxter's trying to send me to a cognitive specialist," I said as soon as she answered. "He wants to prove I have dementia." "What a bastard." Pearl didn't hesitate to say, "I'm sorry, Ivan. But your son is out of line. I know. I felt strangely calm after the initial shock, but at least now I know what I'm dealing with. It's not just greed or concern for my well-being. This is an attempt to exert control over my property. What are you going to do? Pearl asked. First, I'm going to talk to my lawyer. I'll make sure that all the paperwork is in order and that Baxter can't gain access to my estate, even if I'm declared incompetent. Then I'll prepare for battle because it looks like there's no avoiding it. I'm on your side, Pearl said firmly. What can I do to help? Just stay close, I said. And if anything happens to me, you know where all the documents and contacts are. You're the only person I trust completely. After my conversation with Pearl, I sat in Fielding's office for a long time, looking at his picture. What would he do in my shoes? How would he handle his own son trying to take away his home and independence? I knew the answer. Fielding never backed down in the face of adversity. He was a gentle man, but with an iron rod inside. Never let fear rule your decisions, he often said, and I wouldn't let it. I pulled a folder from the safe with the deeds to the Venetian apartment and the Swiss account information. Everything was in order. The title was in my name. The will had been drawn up so that Baxter couldn't contest it. Fielding had thought of everything, but there was one problem that even Fielding couldn't foresee. Our son could try to have me declared incompetent. In that case, all legal barriers would fall. I needed aplomb. I opened my laptop and began researching the laws on capacity and guardianship for the elderly. Then I compiled a list of doctors who could give an independent opinion on my mental state. Finally, I wrote an email to my attorney requesting an emergency appointment. The war was on, and I was ready to fight for my home, for my independence, for the respect I deserved. Baxter and Rosamond had made a grave mistake in underestimating me. They thought they were dealing with a helpless old woman. Pretty soon, they'd realized how wrong they'd been. The invitation to dinner came by email. Baxter had chosen La Sorrento, an Italian restaurant in downtown Neatville, one of the most expensive in town. Fielding and I used to go there for our wedding anniversaries, but after his death, I avoided the place. Too many memories. In the text of the invitation, Baxter mentioned an important family conversation and the need for reconciliation. He italicized the adjective family, which struck me as an odd emphasis. Rossman added a postscript. Please come IVONNE. This is really important to all of us. I showed the letter to Pearl when she stopped by my place later that evening. Sounds like a trap, she said, handing me back my phone. Something they're up to. I agree, I sighed. But if I say no, they'll use it as further proof of my aloofness and strange behavior. I'd better go and see what they're up to. Be careful. Pearl squeezed my hand. And remember, you don't have to agree, Tony Iving. Don't sign any documents, even if it looks like a mere formality. He wasn't born yesterday. I smiled. Fielding taught me to read every line before signing, especially if the document was being slipped to me by a smiling relative. On the day of dinner, I paid more attention to my appearance than usual. I chose a navy blue dress that emphasized the color of my eyes. A pearl necklace Fielding had given me for our 30th wedding anniversary, and silver sapphire earrings. I wasn't going to look like a helpless old lady who could be intimidated into signing anything. The cab pulled up outside the restaurant at 7:00 p.m. sharp. Baxter was already waiting for me at the entrance, glancing nervously at his watch. Mom, you're as precise as always. He kissed my cheek. He smelled of expensive cologne. And slight anxiety. You look beautiful. Thank you. I smiled, noting to myself that it was the second time he'd looked at his watch in 30 seconds. Is everything okay? You seem tense. Everything's fine, he answered too quickly. Rosalind is already inside. We have a private office booked. A private office? Interesting. Under normal circumstance, it might have been explained by a desire to talk without prying ears, but now it only made me more suspicious. Rossman greeted us with a flawless smile. She wore a cream dress that I was sure cost more than the average American's monthly pension. Sitting next to her were my grandchildren, 11-year-old Avery and 9-year-old Piper. Their presence came as a surprise to me. Grandma. Piper jumped up and hugged me. I missed you. I missed you too, honey. I hugged her back, feeling a prick of conscience. I really hadn't seen much of my grandchildren lately, partly because of the strained relationship with their parents, partly because Baxter and Rosalind were always keeping the kids busy with extra classes. Dinner began casually. We talked about school, the latest movies, plans for the summer. The kids talked about their successes. Avery had won the school math Olympiad. Piper had won first place in a drawing contest. I listened with genuine interest, proud of their accomplishments. But gradually I began to notice oddities. Baxter and Rossman exchanged meaningful glances. Rossman fidgeted nervously with her napkin. Baxter twice started to talk about the future of the family, but each time he cut himself short. When dessert arrived, tiramisu for the children and panna cotta for the adults, Baxter suddenly looked at his watch and announced, "Kids, remember we were talking about that special movie in the theater? It starts in 20 minutes. Your Aunt Gloria is waiting for you out front." Avery and Piper looked surprised, but didn't mind the sudden trip to the movies. Rossman quickly helped them pack, and in 5 minutes it was just the three of us, me, Baxter, and his wife. "Now," said Baxter as the study door closed behind the children, "let's talk business." "What business?" I asked, though I already knew where this was going. Baxter pulled a file from the leather briefcase next to his chair. "Mama and I have been thinking about your future for a long time," he began. "You know we love you and want what's best for you." Of course, I remained calm, though my heart began to beat faster. "The house you live in is becoming a burden to you," he continued. "It's too big, too much maintenance. It's too big. It requires constant upkeep, and there's the constant expense of property taxes, insurance, and utilities." "I can handle it," I replied. "I have enough money." "But how long will it last?" Rossman intervened. "Prices are going up. Medical services are getting more expensive. What if you get sick and need expensive treatment?" "I have good insurance," I tried to say calmly, though my insides were seething with resentment. "And I've been saving for a rainy day my whole life." "Mom," Baxter put his hand on the file, "we have a solution that will keep you safe and comfortable for the rest of your life." He opened the folder and pulled out several sheets printed on expensive, watermarked paper. "This is the deed to the trust," he explained. "You'll live in it, but we'll take care of all maintenance and financial matters. In return, after you're well, when you're gone, the house will pass to us to provide for Avery and Piper's future." I took the papers and began to read carefully. Even a quick glance was enough to get the gist of it. It wasn't a management trust, but an outright transfer of ownership to Baxter and Rossman, with the stipulation that I could stay in the house until I died. The new owners would make all decisions about repairs, remodeling, and even interior decoration. "It's not a trust," I said, setting the papers aside. "It's a deed of gift with a life estate. I'm basically giving you the house right now." Baxter blushed slightly. "Technically, yes, but it's for your own good. We can take better care of the house if it's officially ours." "What's stopping you from helping me with the house now?" I asked, You don't need to change ownership for that. Ivan. Rosamond leaned across the table to me. Let's be honest. You're getting older. Your memory isn't what it used to be. What if you forget to pay your insurance or property taxes? What if you make a bad repair decision and waste money? My memory is perfectly fine, I replied coldly. And if I ever feel like I can't handle managing my property, I'll hire 8 professional property managers, not family members. Baxter's face changed. The mask of the caring son began to fall away. Mom, you don't understand the gravity of the situation. His voice became harsher. Rosamond and I have spent a lot of time and effort preparing this treaty. It really is in your best interests. It's in my best interest to remain mistress of my own home. I closed the folder and pushed it away from me. I'm not signing it. Rosamond changed tactics, her voice mellifluous. Ivan, think of your grandchildren. You want them to be provided for, don't you? This house is a significant part of their inheritance. I've already taken care of the grandchildren in my will, I replied. They'll get their share when the time comes, but not before. Baxter straightened sharply. There was a cold glint in his eyes that reminded me of my father-in-law in his worst days. Mum, I didn't want to say this, but you're leaving us no choice. He lowered his voice to a threatening whisper. I have a preliminary report from Dr. Richardson. He thinks you're in the early stages of dementia. If you don't sign these papers voluntarily, we can start the process of declaring you incompetent. I felt the blood drain from my face. That's it. That call from Dr. Richardson was no accident. Baxter had already started setting the stage. This is ridiculous, I said, trying to keep my voice firm. Any independent doctor will attest to my sanity. Maybe, Baxter shrugged, but the process will take time. There will be hearings, examinations, testimony. Think of the stress that would cause at your age. That kind of stress could seriously jeopardize your health. Are you threatening me? I couldn't believe my own son would do such a thing. I'm offering you an easy way out. He pushed the folder toward me. Sign it, and we can forget about this conversation. Everything stays in the family. I looked at Rosamond. She was avoiding my gaze, staring at her unfinished glass of wine. And if I refuse, I asked, though I already knew the answer. Then Baxter leaned back in his chair. We'll have to go through the courts, and I'm afraid our relationship will suffer greatly. You won't be able to see Avery and Piper. We can't let them hang out with a grandmother who doesn't quite understand reality. You're using your own children as weapons. I couldn't hide any disgust in my voice. I'm protecting my family. He cut me off, including you, even though you don't realize it. I felt the anger building inside me, a deep burning anger. But with it came a surprising clarity of thought. I suddenly saw the situation in all its ugliness. My son, my only child, had turned into a greedy, petty man willing to blackmail his own mother for real estate. Baxter, I said calmly, I'm not signing those papers. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Mum. His tone became threatening. Think again. You will be deprived of your family. No visits from grandchildren. No holidays together. No support in times of need. I almost laughed. Family? The same family that's trying to take my house away from me right now. The one that's threatening to declare me crazy if I don't comply. It's not a family, Baxter. It's a racket, Ivan. Rosamond finally spoke, her voice shaking with tension. Don't jump to conclusions. We're all on edge saying things we don't mean. Oh, I think that's exactly what Baxter means, I said, looking my son in the eye. He's always been stubborn and determined, but there used to be other qualities in him. Honesty, fairness, concern for his fellow man. Where have they gone, son? Baxter blushed, but didn't look away. You're living in the past, Mom, he said. The world has changed. You can't let sentimentality get in the way of practical solutions. Blackmailing your own mother is a practical solution. I shook my head. Your father would have been disappointed. It was a low blow, and I knew it. Baxter had always idolized his father, even when he'd rebelled against him as a teenager. The mention of Fielding's disappointment hit the mark. Don't you dare tell me what my father would have thought. Baxter slammed his fist on the table, making the dishes bounce. You have no right. I was his wife for 42 years, I said quietly. I knew him better than anyone else, and I know what he would have said when he saw his son and daughter-in-law trying to take the house from an elderly woman. Rosamond intervened, trying to lighten the mood. Let's all calm down. Maybe today isn't the best day for this Kendoff decision. Yvonne, take the documents home. Study them in peace. We can come back to this conversation in a week. But Baxter wouldn't back down. No, he pushed the folder towards me. Decide now, Mom. Sign it or you'll lose your family. His voice trailed off into a shout, drawing the attention of the waiter, who peered into the office to see if everything was all right. Rossman gave him a strained smile and assured him that everything was fine. Just a family discussion. Asked door. Closed, I gathered my purse and stood up. I'm not signing those papers, I said firmly. And don't think that threats will make me change my mind. I've seen worse things in my life than the anger of a spoiled man. You'll regret this. Baxter stood up too. I swear you will. I already am. I said for not seeing what you were becoming. For failing to instill in you the values your father held dear. It's my fault and I have to live with it. I turned to leave, but Rosamond grabbed my arm. Yvonne, please don't go like that, she said, panic in her eyes. We can discuss this calmly. There's nothing more to discuss. I released her hand. Tell Avery and Piper that Grandma loves them if you let them hear it. I walked out of the office with my head held high, even though I was shaking inside from the shock of the experience. The restaurant was crowded, but no one paid attention to the elderly woman who had just lost her family. It was drizzling outside. I hadn't brought an umbrella, counting on Baxter to give me a ride home. Now I had to call a cab and wait for it under the restaurant's visor, trying not to cry in public. When the cab finally arrived, I gave the address and leaned back in the seat, feeling incredibly tired. Their driver, a young guy with dreadlocks, gave me a concerned look in the rear-view mirror. Everything okay, ma'am? He asked. You look upset. Family problems, I replied succinctly. It's nothing. At home, the first thing I did was call Pearl. She listened without interruption to my story of the failed dinner, and then launched into such a tirade against Baxter and Rosamond that I smiled in spite of the pain in my heart. Come to my place. Pearl suggested when she'd let off some steam. Don't be alone tonight. Thanks, but I need to be in my own house, I replied. To feel its walls, its protection. It's what I fought for today. I understand, Pearl said after a pause. But if you change, mind, call me any time. I'll come get you, even if it's 3 o'clock in the morning. After talking to Pearl, I walked slowly around the house, touching familiar objects as if I were saying hello to them. In my husband's study, I stopped in front of his portrait. What am I going to do, darling? I asked aloud. How do I fight my own son? I walked over to his desk and opened a secret drawer. The documents for the Venetian apartment were where I'd left them. The Swiss account information was safely tucked away elsewhere. These were me trump cards that Baxter and Rossman didn't even know about. Sitting down at me desk, I pulled out a notepad and pen. It was time to plan a counterattack. Baxter thought he had me cornered, but he didn't know all my resources. I didn't know his father had anticipated his situation and prepared me for it. The first item on my list was to see a lawyer. I had 2. make sure all my paperwork was in order, and no machinations by Baxter could take away me control of my assets. The second item was a visit to an independent doctor to evaluate my cognitive state. I needed an official report refuting insinuations of incipient dementia. Third was a review and possibly a reissuance of all financial instruments associated with my overseas assets. And finally, and most importantly, I had to decide how to use my financial advantage. Simply defending this wasn't enough. I had to show Baxter and Rossman that I was not a helpless victim, but a worthy adversary. I began the morning after the disaster with a phone call to Lawrence Jenkins, our family lawyer. Fielding, Andy had known him for over 30 years. He had helped us with the purchase of our Neatville home, drafted all the important documents, including Fielding's will. Now in his 70s, Lawrence was still practicing, albeit on a limited basis, handling only the affairs of long-time clients. "Lawrence, I need an urgent consultation," I said as soon as he picked up the phone. "It's about Baxter's attempt to take over my house." There was a pause and then a heavy sigh. "Yvonne, I was afraid it would come to this." "When can you come to the office?" "In an hour, if it's convenient for you." "I'll wait for you," he replied briefly. Lawrence's office was in an old red brick building in downtown Neatville. Oak paneling, leather chairs, and huge bookcases O'Flegel too created an atmosphere of reliability and tradition. "I always felt protected here." "Tell me," Lawrence said, as we settled into his office with cups of tea. He listened attentively to the story of the restaurant ultimatum, without interrupting, making occasionalities in his notebook. "So, they're threatening to declare you incompetent," he said thoughtfully when I finished. "It's serious, Yvonne, but not as serious as they think it is." "Explain," I asked. "You see, declaring a person incompetent is a long and complicated process. You need strong medical evidence, the opinions of several specialists, witness testimony. Considering that you're obviously of sound mind and full memory, their chances are slim to none." But Baxter mentioned some kind of report from Dr. Richardson, which he didn't even visit. Lawrence grinned. "Any court would dismiss such an opinion as unreliable, but let's be on the safe side. I'll arrange for you to see Dr. Eleanor Price. She's a leading gerontologist and neurologist specializing specifically in cognitive impairment in the elderly. Her opinion will be a strong argument in your favor." I nodded, relieved that we had a concrete plan of action. "What about the deeds to the house? Couldn't Baxter somehow get around me and get the deed to it?" "Not if we're vigilant." Lawrence pulled a folder with my name on it out of his desk drawer. "I've been through all the paperwork. The house is in your name only. And after Fielding died, you became the sole owner. No liens, no co-owners. Baxter has no legal rights to the property. What if he does get me declared incompetent?" That was the question that kept bugging me. "Then he'd have to get a guardianship." Lawrence rubbed his chin. "But we can prevent that scenario. I suggest we draw up an advance directive in case of incapacity. In it, you'll specify who'd like to be your guardian if, theoretically speaking, you become incapacitated. And who should I name?" I wondered. "Pearl would be an excellent choice." Lawrence nodded. "But there are other options. You could appoint a professional guardian, a lawyer, or a financial advisor who would act solely in your best interests. Or you could set up a special trust to manage your estate, according to predetermined rules." We discussed all the options and eventually decided to appoint Pearl as my potential guardian with a trustee from Lawrence Law Firm as a backup. "Now, let's talk about your foreign assets." Lawrence lowered his voice even though we were alone in the office. "Fielding told me about the Venetian apartments and the Swiss account. Does Baxter know about them?" "I think he suspects something," I answered. Rossman saw a letter from the Venetian bank recently, and they mentioned plans for a trip to Italy which they supposedly can't afford because of financial difficulties. We need to check the condition of these sea sets and perhaps further protect them. Lawrence made another note. I have a colleague in Zurich who specializes in international property law. I will contact him later today. The next morning I went to see Dr. Eleanor Price. Her clinic was located in Amadon Medical Center on the outskirts of Neatville. The doctor herself was an energetic woman in her 50s with short graying hair and a keen eye. Mrs. Holloway. She shook my hand firmly. Lawrence told me about your situation, Dot. It's a rather unpleasant situation, but we'll try to help. The examination was thorough and took almost 3 hours. Dr. Price tested my memory, attention, logical thinking ability, spatial orientation. I took various tests, answered questions, solved puzzles. You're in great shape, Mrs. Holloway, Dr. Price said when we were done. Your cognitive function is normal for your age, and in some aspects even better. I see no signs of dementia or other neurodegenerative diseases. Can you give me an official opinion? I asked. Of course, she nodded. I will prepare a detailed report with the results of all the tests and my professional opinion. It will be ready in 2 days. This document will have weight in court if it comes to that. I thanked the doctor and was about to leave when she stopped. Mrs. Holloway, I understand that your son's situation is very stressful. Stress can take a toll on your health, especially at your age. Please take care of yourself. When I returned home, I found an envelope from the Social Security Administration in my mailbox. Inside was a notice that a certain Dr. Richardson had requested access to my medical records in connection with a health evaluation to determine the need for guardianship. It was already an open warfare move. Baxter acted quickly and decisively, using every means available to him. I immediately called Lawrence to inform him of the new development. Don't panic, he said after listening to me. This is standard procedure in a custody proceeding, but without your consent or a court order, the office will not release this data. I will immediately prepare a formal objection on your behalf. That evening I got a call from Delia Harrington, an old book club acquaintance of mine. Yvonne, darling, you won't believe what I heard today. She began without preamble. Rose Kingsley has been telling everyone at the club that you have a serious memory problem and that Baxter is going to take custody of you. Is that true? Absolutely false, I replied, trying to keep my voice calm, though my insides were seething with indignation. I had a check-up with the city's top neurologist this morning. I don't have any memory or cognitive problems. That's what I thought, Delia exclaimed, telling Rose. Yvonne Holloway quoted entire paragraphs from Middlemarch last week without a single mistake. What dementia? And she said Baxter says his mother has good days and bad days. On the bad days, she doesn't even recognize her grandchildren. That's an outrageous lie. My voice shook with anger. I always recognize my grandchildren. It's just that Baxter now forbids me from seeing them unless I give him the house. After he'd spoken to Dia, the phone rang again. This time it was Perry Jameson, my gardener, who came once a week to tidy up the garden. Mrs. Holloway, he began, embarrassed. I'm sorry to bother you, but your son called me today. He said you were no longer in need of my services, that you would soon be moved to a nursing home. What? I almost screamed. Perry, the answer is not true. I'm not moving anywhere, and I still need your help with the garden. I thought something was wrong, he said with a sigh of relief. Minus Mr. Baxter sounded strange and offered me a job in his garden. Instead of yours. Please keep coming as usual, I asked. And if Baxter calls again, tell him you're only talking to me about work. In the evening, a reply came from Signor Bertolucci in Venice. He confirmed that both apartments were in perfect condition and that the title deeds were in order. Moreover, he said that he had recently received an inquiry from a Mr. Holloway, who was inquiring about the status of the property, claiming to be my son and potential heir. I have not provided any information, Signora Holloway, as you requested in our previous arrangements, Bertolucci wrote. But I must warn you that this gentleman was very persistent and mentioned the possibility of legal action. So Baxter did indeed know about the Venetian apartments and was actively to get information about them. This confirmed my worst fears. He was not only interested in my Neatville home, but my entire estate. Before going to bed, I checked the front door, windows, and alarm system. After today's events, I felt literally under siege. As I lay in bed trying to sleep, the phone rang again. Baxter's name popped up on the screen. I hesitated but decided tones were it. It was better to know what he was up to. Mom. His voice sounded unexpectedly conciliatory. I want to apologize for what happened at the restaurant. Rosand and I put too much pressure on you. It was wrong. I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. Baxter never apologized for nothing. I suggest we start over. He continued. Let's meet tomorrow. Just you and me. We'll talk calmly without papers or ultimatums. What do you want to talk about, Baxter? I asked you straight out about the future, Mum. How we can help each other. He paused. I know about Venice, Mum, and the Swiss account. Here it is. Cards on the table. What exactly do you know? My voice sounded calm, though my heart was pounding like crazy. Enough, he answered evasively. Enough to know that you're not the helpless old woman you pretend to be. You have assets that you have never told me. Your only son. Those assets are the result of your father's labor and investments and mine, I said. Fielding and I decided not to tell you about them for certain reasons. What reasons? There was a hint of irritation in his voice. What? I'm not trustworthy. I'm your son, the son who threatens his mother with the loss of her family if she doesn't give him the house. I reminded him. The son who spread rumors about my supposed dementia to neighbors and acquaintances. The son who is trying to cancel my gardener's services. It was as if Fielding had anticipated this behavior. There was silence at the other end of the line. Then Baxter spoke again in a different tone, cold and calculating. Listen, Mother, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. I propose a compromise. You give me the house and in return I'll help you manage the Venetian apartments. My connections in the financial world could be useful, and of course, you can see your grandchildren again. And if I refuse, I asked even though I already knew the answer. Then Neil have to be more forceful. His voice became hard. I have contacts in the tax office. Questions about foreign assets and their declaration can cause a lot of problems. Mom, are you threatening me with a tax audit? I couldn't believe I was hearing this from my own son. I'm offering you a way out that's good for both of us, he replied. Think about it. I'll call you tomorrow to find out your decision. He hung up and I sat in the dark, shaken to the core. Threats, manipulation, blackmail. My own son had stooped to such methods. Fielding was right to insist on the secrecy of our overseas assets. He saw something in Baxter that I didn't want to see. Boundless greed and a willingness to go to extremes to achieve his goals. He dialed Lawrence's number even though it was late. I'm sorry to bother you, I said when he answered. But the situation has escalated. Baxter knows about Venice and the Swiss account, and he's threatening a tax audit if I don't give him the house. What a rascal, Lawrence muttered. Don't worry, Ivan. All taxes on the overseas assets were paid on time. All returns filed. Fielding was very meticulous in these matters. We're safe from a tax audit. I was relieved, but my anxiety wasn't completely gone. What do I do, Lawrence? He won't stop. Today it's threats of a tax audit. Tomorrow it'll be something else. It's time to go on the offensive, the lawyer said firmly. Tomorrow we're filing a formal objection to Dr. Richardson's request, attaching Dr. Price's report as soon as it's ready, and filing a motion for an injunction to stop Baxter from interfering in your affairs and disseminating defamatory information. It's time to show him you're not a defenseless victim. You're right, I agreed after a pause. It's time to stop being defensive. It's time to act decisively. The decision came to me that morning as I watched the robins flitting about the birdhouse. In the garden, Fielding always said that the best solutions came to him when he watched nature. The way birds build nests, the way clouds change shape, the way the wind sways the branches of trees. Nature has the answers to everything. Ivan, you said to say, you just have to be able to see. I decided to organize a dinner for Baxter and Rossman. One last family dinner, but they wouldn't know about it beforehand. On second thought, I chose Friday, 3 days from now. Enough time to get everything ready, but not so much that Baxter would have time to come up with a new plan of attack. After mailing the invitation, I immediately called Lawrence. I want you to have all me asset files ready by Friday, I said. Swiss account statements, documents 4th Venetian apartment, an appraisal of the Neatville house. Everything you could possibly need to fully disclose my financial situation. Are you sure? I could hear the doubt in Lawrence's voice. We were just talking about protecting that information from Baxter. I've decided to play the odds, I replied. Baxter already knows the existence of these assets, but not fairytales. I want to use the element of surprise. Show him all the cards, but on me terms. All right. Lawrence hesitated. I'll prepare the documents, but I'd like to attend this dinner if you don't mind. I object, I said softly. It should be a family dinner, just Baxter, Rossman, and me. One last attempt at a honest conversation before I didn't finish my sentence. Before what? Yvonne Lawrence asked cautiously before I begin a new chapter of my life. I answered perhaps in another country. After talking to Lawrence, I contacted Pearl and told her about my plan. She was supportive as always, but suggested an extra precaution. I'll be around during dinner, she said firmly. Not in the house, of course, but close enough to come to my aid, if anything goes wrong. Do you think Baxter might become aggressive? I asked anxiously. I think Eamon, who threatens his own mother with a tax audit and spreads lies about her mental health, is capable of a lot of things, Pearl replied. It's better to be safe. I spent the next 2 days preparing. I got all the necessary documents from Lawrence, ordered food from Baxter's favorite restaurant. I didn't want to waste energy cooking for people who had treated me like this. Prepared a presentation of my assets in form of a neat folder for each of the guests. I also met with the director of the Sparks of Genius Charitable Foundation, which was dedicated to supporting gifted children from low-income families. We discussed the possibility of creating a Fielding hallway named Grant to fund architectural education for talented makers. The director was excited at the prospect of a major donation and assured me that all the legal formalities could be settled as soon as possible. On the morning of the dinner, I received an email from Senor Bertolucci. He had found me a wonderful cleaning company to prepare the Venetian apartment for my arrival and provided me with the contacts of a lawyer who specialized in immigration issues for Americans moving to Italy. Things were working out just fine. Baxter and Rossman arrived precisely at 7 o'clock in the evening. Unusual punctuality for them. They looked tense but confident. Baxter was carrying a leather folder that I recognized immediately. The same house transfer papers he tried to get me to sign at the restaurant. Mom. He kissed me cheek with feigned warmth. You look beautiful, Ivan. Rosamond kissed me too, leaving a trace of lipstick on my cheek. What a wonderful fragrance. Have you been cooking all day? No. I smiled, pointing to the boxes with the latter logo on the kitchen table. I ordered delivery from the restaurant. Thought I'd treat myself today. They exchanged quick glances. Ordering from an expensive restaurant didn't fit their idea of an elderly woman who was supposedly struggling financially. Great idea. Baxter smiled awkwardly. The less hassle, the better. We moved into the dining room, where I'd already set the table for 3. Crystal glasses, silverware, the finest china, just like for a special occasion. Wine, I offered, showing him a bottle of expensive Italian Baro. With pleasure, Baxter replied, clearly confused by my festive mood. Do we have a special occasion? A very special occasion. I smiled, pouring the wine into glasses. Today was the day everything would fall into place. During the first course, we talked about the weather, the latest movies, the stock market, anything that really mattered to each of us. Baxter glanced nervously at his folder, which he placed beside him. Rosamond drank her wine faster than usual. When the main course was served, filet mignon with truffle sauce, Baxter decided to cut to the chase. Mother, he began, setting aside his fork. I'm glad you invited us. It shows that you're ready for a constructive dialogue. Absolutely. I nodded, continuing to eat with visible pleasure. I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation. About what you said about Venice and the Swiss account. Baxter tensed. And what conclusions have you come to? It's time to set the record straight. I blotted my lips with my napkin. But let's finish dinner. Will serve dessert along with a frank conversation. This postponement clearly annoyed Baxter, but he held back. Rosamond tried to fill the awkward pause with stories about her gallery's latest exhibition, her children's school successes, her plans for a summer vacation. I nodded politely, asked questions, kept the conversation going, as if there was no conflict between us. Finally, when dessert, tiramisu and espresso was served, I leaned back in my chair and looked at my son and daughter-in-law. So I began. You mentioned that you knew about my Venetian apartment and Swiss account, and hinted at some trouble with the IRS if I didn't agree to give you the house. Isn't that right? Baxter clearly hadn't expected such bluntness. He choked on his coffee and coughed. Rosamond gave him a worried look. Yeah, I just wanted to say that we could find a mutually beneficial solution. He mumbled, wiping his lips with a napkin. Help each other out. Oh, I totally agree. I smiled and reached over to the side table where the prepared folders lay. So, I decided to fully disclose my financial situation so that there would be no misunderstandings between us. I handed each of them a file folder. Baxter opened his with ill-concealed, avid interest. Rosamond followed suit, though with more restraint. As you can see, I continued calmly, I do have 2 properties in Venice. One in the Dorsoduro district is a 2-room apartment overlooking the canal purchased in 1993. The second in Canorio, a 3-bedroom apartment, purchased in 1998. The total value of both properties today was about €3 million. Rosamond's eyes widened as she turned the page and saw pictures of elegant Venetian interiors. On the next page, you'll find the Swiss account. It pointed to the documents. As you can see, there are $7 million in it. All taxes paid, all returns filed. On time. There are no problems with the IRS. And there can't be. Baxter swallowed, his eyes fixed on the numbers on the paper. And that's not all, I continued nonchalantly. On the last page, you'll find an estimate of the value of this house. $2,100,000 at today's prices. Not bad for an old woman's burden. Is it, Mom? Baxter finally found his voice. I don't understand. Why did you keep this from us? We could have what? I interrupted. Help me spend the money, take care of my welfare, or maybe start spreading rumors about my dementia even earlier to gain control of my assets. We never, Rosin began, but I stopped her with a raised hand. Please, let's dispense with the lies today, I said firmly. You both know exactly what you've been doing. Intimidation, manipulation, blackmail, all to gain possession of my property. You even used your own children as leverage, forbidding them to see their grandmother. Baxter blushed. We were acting in your best interests. You just don't understand. No, you don't understand. I looked him straight in the eye. Your father saw this coming, Baxter. He saw something in you that I didn't want to see. Greed, selfishness, a willingness to betray even the people closest to you for money. That's why he and I decided to keep our overseas assets from you. My father never hesitated, shocked by my words. Your father loved you, but he wasn't blind to your shortcomings. I said softer. He hoped you would grow past them, that you would become a man of principle and honor like himself. Alas, that was not to be. There was a heavy silence in the room. Rosamond fidgeted nervously with her napkin, avoiding my gaze. Baxter was looking at the documents with an expression that was a mixture of greed, shame, and anger. What now? He finally asked scadurously. Why did he show us all this? To mock you, to make you realize the magnitude of your mistake, I said calmly, and to announce my decision on selling the house in Neatville. What? Baxter jumped up and down. To whom? It doesn't matter to you anymore, I shrugged, because the proceeds are going to the Fielding Holloway Educational Foundation to support gifted children from low-income families who want to study architecture. You can't do that, Rosen exclaimed. This house is part of your grandchildren's inheritance. I can and I will. I looked at her coldly. As for the grandchildren, they'll inherit when I'm 80 or when I die, if I die first. That is the condition of the trust I set up yesterday. The money will be used solely for their education and a down payment on a home. Neither you nor Baxter can access it. You're disinheriting us. Baxter's voice shook with rage. No, I shook my head. I'm protecting my grandchildren's inheritance from parents who are willing to use their own children as weapons in a family conflict. And I'm protecting my property from people who try to steal it through deceit and manipulation. I paused, took a sip of wine, and continued, In a week, I'm leaving for Venice for good. The house will be on the market in 3 days. You have time to pick up any family heirlooms or memorabilia you wish to keep. After that, I don't want you in my house. You can't just leave, Baxter muttered, clearly shaken by the development. I can and I will, I repeated. In Venice, I'll have a beautiful apartment overlooking the canal. $7 million in my account, and freedom from toxic relationships. I'd say that's a great prospect for a woman my age. Rosamond suddenly burst into tears. What about the children? Are you just going to leave them? They love you. I love them too, I said softly. And I'll be in regular video contact with them. When they're older, I'll invite them to Venice for vacations without you, of course. It's just revenge, Baxter said. No, I shook my head. It's self-defense and a lesson for both of you. You can't build your happiness on the misery of others, even if they are your parents. Sooner or later, it will backfire on you. Baxter jumped up, knocking over his chair. You'll regret this. I'll challenge your decision in court. I'll prove you incompetent. Try it. I smiled without a shadow of fear. I have a report from Dr. Ililanapris. the city's leading gerontologist and neurologist, that my cognitive functions are perfectly fine. I have a testimony from neighbors and acquaintances that you spread false information about my mental health. And you have a recording of our phone conversation where you threaten me with a tax audit if I don't turn the house over to you. Whose side do you think the court will take? Baxter turned pale. Rosamond grabbed his arm. Come on, darling. We need to think this over. They were about to leave, but I stopped them at the door. Oh, yes. I almost forgot. You can throw away the deed to the house. You won't be needing it anymore. When the door closed behind them, I felt a strange lightness. It was as if a heavy weight I'd been carrying for years had suddenly disappeared. I knew that Baxter and Rosamond wouldn't give up so easily, that there would be more attempts to challenge my decision, perhaps even lawsuits. But now I had a plan. I had proof of their bad faith, and I was determined to defend myself and my independence. I called Pearl. Her was waiting in her car nearby. Everything went according to plan. I said, You can come in now. Baxter and Rossman had already left. When Pearl arrived, we opened a second bottle of wine and settled down in the living room. I told her in detail about Baxter and Rossman's reaction to my news. Oh, how I wish I could have seen their faces. Pearl laughed, imagining Thassini, especially when you showed them the Swiss bank statement. They were shocked. I smiled, remembering, especially Rossman. She must have thought it was some small savings, not millions. And now what? Pearl asked more seriously. Are you really leaving in a week? Yes, I nodded. The tickets are already bought. Signor Bertolucci will arrange a meeting with an immigration lawyer as soon as I arrive. I'll leave most of my things here. Their ultra will sell them along with the house. I'll take only the essentials and memorabilia. I'll miss you. Pearl took me. Hand. 50 years of friendship and suddenly you're on another continent. Modern technology works wonders. I squeezed her hand in return. We'll talk by video link every week. And you should definitely come visit me. Venice is gorgeous in the spring. We talked late into the night, reminiscing about the past, discussing the future. Pearl stayed the night. The house had plenty of guest rooms and neither of us wanted to be alone. After such an emotionally intense evening, in the morning I woke up with a sense of newness and freedom. Birds were singing outside. The window and the sun was casting a golden light on the room. I thought of Fielding. What would he say about my decision? He'd probably approve. He'd always appreciated grit and determination. Life is too short to compromise your conscience, Ivan, he often said. The next week was a busy one. I met with a realtor, signed a contract to sell the house, selected the things I would take with me to Venice, and contacted the Sparks of Genius charity to make a donation. Lawrence helped with the legal side of all the transactions. Mackenzie Baxter couldn't challenge any of my decisions. Baxter called several times. First with threats, then with attempts at reconciliation, finally with offers of compromise. I was polite but adamant. No compromises, no concessions. Just clear boundaries and a complete end to the toxic relationship. On the day I left, I walked around the house one last time, saying goodbye to every room, every corner that held memories of happy years with Fielding. It was a little sad to leave the place where most of my life had been spent. But that sadness was mixed with the exciting anticipation of a new chapter. Pearl drove me to the airport. We hugged goodbye, both of us with tears in our eyes. Be happy, she whispered to me. You deserve it after everything you've been through. Thank you for everything, I replied. For your support, for your friendship, for always being there for me. When the plane left the ground, I felt the last thread that bound me to the past break. Ahead was Venice, The city of canals and bridges, the city of art and beauty, the city that Fieldingen I loved so much. Now it would be my new home. Senor Bartolucci met me at Marco Polo Airport and accompanied me by watercab to my apartment in Dorsoduro. As the boat glided down the Grand Canal, past majestic palazzos and ancient churches, I could feel the heaviness of the last few months slowly fading away. Venice was welcoming me into its arms, promising peace and new possibilities. The apartment looked exactly as I remembered it. Elegant rooms with high ceilings, antique furniture, windows overlooking the quiet canal. Senor Bertolucci had taken care of everything. Fresh flowers and vases, a bottle of Prosecco in the refrigerator, clean linens in the bed, all ready for a new life to begin. In the evening, I sat by the window, watching the last rays of sunlight coloring the canal water in golden tones. In my hands, I held Fielding's photograph, the only thing I had put in a prominent place when I arrived. "Here I am, darling," I said quietly, looking at his smiling face, starting a new chapter. No bacter, no toxicity, no manipulation. Just me, you in my heart, and this beautiful city. I think you'd approve. In that moment, I felt a strange calm and confidence. It was like Fielding was really there to support my decision. I knew there were still many challenges ahead. Adapting to a new country, learning the language, building a new social network, but also knew that I had the strength, resources, and determination to overcome all the obstacles. Tomorrow would be the start of a new day, a new life, and I was ready for this adventure. At 68, with a Venetian apartment, a Swiss account, and freedom from toxic relationships, not too bad for an old lady who was considered helpless and forgetful by her own